Hey guys, how's it going? It's Danconia, and welcome back to the Overwatch League Roundup 2020 Week 29 results. So that's it. That's it. Week 29 has taken place. We have completed every single regular season fixture for the 2020 season of the Overwatch League. It has been a rough ride. I don't think anyone can deny that. We've had a lot of bumps to get over, but we have got over them, and we are left with the teams all competing in the playoffs. Quite obviously, that's the way the season has now worked. But a lot of people will be getting different seedings. They will work to benefit different teams, and we have to clear that up in this video, going through the results of week 29. And it's been an interesting one because we've seen some very tight matches at times. Some very tight matches. Some teams have actually done better than I expected during this week, and of course we ended on an absolute barnstormer of a match. But let's get into it. Let's start off where we began this weekend with Vancouver Titans taking on the Boston Uprising. This was the Boston Uprising's last game of the season, until the playoffs at least anyway. Would they turn up? No. This is a 3-0 for the Vancouver Titans. I don't think anyone expected any differently. The Vancouver Titans have been steadily improving, dare I say, and they outmatched the Boston Uprising. The bright sparks for Boston Uprising, well, it's Jerry, isn't it? It's always Jerry. There was a nice little battle going on between Shockwave and Jerry on the hit scans, but apart from that, this was very much in Vancouver's ballpark, and therefore the Vancouver Titans got a healthy, nice victory ahead of their much more difficult match much later on this weekend. But then we moved into the Los Angeles Gladiators taking on the Florida Mayhem. Now, Florida Mayhem had nothing to play for. Los Angeles Gladiators, however, they were one of 3 teams that could take the 5th spot, the last spot in the top 5, which would gain them a better seeding in the overall playoffs. So they were definitely up for a fight here. But it doesn't go their way. It is a fairly close match. Gladiators did impress me during this entire week, but it is a 3-1 for the Florida Mayhem. The Florida Mayhem finished their season on a nice win. Florida Mayhem are 4th in the standings, and I think they have got a good chance of being a very, very unpredictable and perhaps an upset sort of team going into the overall playoffs, because we have a clear top 3 at the moment in Paris, Philadelphia, and San Francisco. And Florida are the first team in the lineup to say, hey, it's not just a top 3. So Florida have got a lot of potential, and I think they might be a dark horse to cause some upsets during these playoffs. But Los Angeles Gladiators, this is the game I expected them to lose. But they had to win the other 2 games they had this week. They had 3 matches. So let's move on, and we'll get to see if they got those wins. But we move to APAC now, and we started off with the Hangzhou Spark taking on the Seoul Dynasty in the Asian region. And, oh dear. So, Seoul Dynasty had a magnificent week last week. Magnificent. They went 9-0, 2 3-0s against the London Spitfire, and a 3-0 against the New York Excelsior. Comprehensive victories. Seoul looked very well practiced, well rehearsed, and they looked like a team that could be one of the better teams well, I'm not going to say the best, because the best is Shanghai, but one of the better teams in Asia. And then they take on the Hangzhou Spark, and they get 3-0'd by the Hangzhou Spark. Hangzhou Spark didn't play last week, so they have had the advantage of being able to prepare longer for this Seoul Dynasty side. Is that why they lost this? Hangzhou Spark really did turn up. It's nice to see Architect and Godsby really having a good game. And Prophet didn't have the impact he's been able to have against other teams for Seoul Dynasty. So this is a nasty one for Seoul. This is a nasty one. I can't put it any other way, really. I expected Seoul Dynasty to perhaps win this match, if not make it really close, and it wasn't anything of the sort. And that is a disappointing look for Seoul Dynasty, and disappointing going into the last part of, well, the playoffs. No one wants this sort of loss in the lead up to the playoffs, and they look like they are on a really good run going into it. So it's a disappointing look for the Seoul Dynasty. But after that, we would see the London Spitfire taking on the New York Excelsior. This was New York's last game of the season, so was its Hangzhou Sparks in the last match. And London had looked very, very rough recently. Let's be honest. They were going into this match on a 0-8 match loss streak, a 0-15 map loss streak. They were on a massively big downturn. But there are glimmers of hope for London Spitfire in this match. It is a 3-1 to the New York Excelsior, but in this match there are 2 full holds. They full hold Excelsior on the second map, which was Route 66. They also get full held, so yeah, I mean, that's something. And they get a full hold on Numbani, which is actually New York Excelsior, one of New York Excelsior's very successful maps, and they get the win on that map, which was very impressive, breaking their map loss streak at 17, and they will not be matching Shanghai. I'm sure everyone's pretty happy about that if you're a London Spitfire fan. This week is a story for London Spitfire. They seem to be really kind of clicking on defense, but when it comes to being able to attack points, they don't know when to attack. They don't know how to go in, and it's where they fall short. So New York Excelsior were value for their win here, definitely, but there were glimmers of hope for London Spitfire. Moving on to later in the Saturday, and we saw Washington Justice taking on the San Francisco Shock. We saw Decay for the Washington Justice, and he looked rather good, I'm not gonna lie. He caused the Shock some problems, but Ans managed to kind of equalize, if not better, Decay, which was exactly what the Shock needed. They get a 3-0 here over the Washington Justice. You'd expect it. Shock are pretty much better in every single area than the Washington Justice. The Washington Justice finish off the season. I mean, that's it. We don't expect them to get anything from a match against the Shock, do we? So we can't be too harsh on this Justice side. And it's a case of GG, go next. It's time for playoffs. Anyway, moving on, we had the Dallas Fuel taking on the Toronto Defiant. This was actually a nice display from the Dallas Fuel. I like this from Dallas. This is a 3-1 for them, showing that they can get nice, healthy victories against teams that are kind of around them. Toronto were kind of just below that mid-table sort of place, hanging around with Dallas. So it shows us a clear difference between, say, somewhere like 12th and 13th and 14th and 15th, let's say. So I think this is a great victory for Dallas Fuel. They look like they had much more stability than the Toronto Defiant. Toronto had good looks and then quite bad looks. All in all, I think Dallas Fuel are very well worthy of their 3-1 victory here. Then afterwards, we had the Los Angeles Gladiators taking on the Atlanta Reign. This was a really pivotal match. Atlanta Reign had to win this. They simply had to win this, and they had to win it well, considering their other match in the week. For the Gladiators, this was also a must-win match. 2 teams in the fight for the 5th spot, and neither could slip up. How does this end? It's a 3-1 victory for the Los Angeles Gladiators. This doesn't surprise me all that much. I think Gladiators are a better team than the Atlanta Reign right now. I think Gladiators have really felt their way into the season. They were a team that was much hyped up at the start of the season. They were thought of as perhaps a top 6 team. And they've been inconsistent. They never really lived up to it until now, where they seem to be really finding a footing and they're beating teams that they really need to beat. Atlanta Reign, it's been a little up and down, should we say, this season. They certainly haven't reached the potential that we thought they would. And this ends the hunt for 5th spot. They will be in that second pack of teams to compete in the playoffs, and they'll have to work away from there. That's all I can say. And this saucy Erster swapping in, swapping out thing, I think this needs an answer, because I think it's disrupting quite a bit, and the saucy Sombra doesn't seem like it's quite doing the job. So there's stuff to work on for the Atlanta Reign, but that is where they're going to finish pretty much in terms of their hunt for the 5th spot. Also concerning the hunt for the 5th spot, Valiant taking on the Vancouver Titans. Valiant needed a very nice comprehensive win here. They get a nice comprehensive win here. It's a 3-0 for the Valiant. Vancouver Titans end their season on a 3-0, then a 0-3. The Titans, it's still, it's been rough. Coming in after all of what happened to Vancouver, they came into a very awkward situation. inexperienced at this level of Overwatch. And yeah, it's been improving for the Titans. It has not improved enough, but I think they have a chance of upsetting in the lowest part of the bracket that they're going to be in anyway for the play-ins, which is what they'll be in. And I think they have a chance of putting on a show because I think they've got better. The Shockwave KSP duel was very interesting, but KSP won in the end. And yeah, that's all there is to say about that. But moving on, and on the Sunday we saw the last APAC match of this season. It would be the Seoul Dynasty taking on the London Spitfire for yes, the third time in 2 weeks. And the 2 times we saw this last week were 2 really comprehensive 3-0s for the Seoul Dynasty. This is different. This, again, is London Spitfire showing that they seem to be learning. And, dare I say it, J-Mac was getting value at times this week. For the first time I have ever seen him get any value on Winston. There were bits of miscommunication from the London Spitfire. And that's kind of worrying from a coaching point of view because, you know, Pavane and Agape, they've been working on this project for a year now, nearly. And to still be having these sort of miscommunication issues, it is slightly worrying. But this is an improved London Spitfire side. And the only caveat I have to it is the fact that they've come into this meta, or they've improved to the point where they're finally starting to be comfortable in this meta, but all of a sudden this meta may be shifting away. So have they come too late, basically, is what I'm saying. Seoul Dynasty, however, this is rough. There's no other way I can paint it for this Seoul Dynasty side. It looked so good last week, and this week you've gone 3-0 against Hangzhou, and you've been taken to 5 maps against London Spitfire. One of them was a full hold. You know, Spitfire could have taken this if they performed better on the last map. So this is not the entrance to the playoffs that the Seoul Dynasty were looking for, is it? Let's be honest. It's been a rough week for the Dynasty. It's been a step backwards for the Dynasty since the really good week they showed last week. Where is the Dynasty that 3-0'd the New York Excelsior? That's what I'm asking. And I guess we will see what they come up with in the playoffs because they tend to do better in tournament situations. But moving on, and that is the end of APAC. So congratulations APAC, clap the APAC people. But now we move to the last 3 matches we would see in the NA season. First of all was the Dallas Fuel taking on the Paris Eternal. I told you I was impressed with the Dallas Fuel this week, and although this is a 3-1 victory for the Paris Eternal nothing to play for, they're going to seal up that 3rd spot in North America. Dallas Fuel, they made this an interesting match. They made this close. And I think Dallas Fuel a couple of weeks ago, this would have been an easy 3-0 for the Paris Eternal. Dallas Fuel looked like they could hang with them. They could give them a game. Yes, they're not going to get the win, but I think this was a more of an impressive display for the Dallas Fuel. And if this inclination is going to continue in an upwards fashion for the Dallas Fuel, maybe, just maybe, the playoffs look a little bit more promising than they did a couple of weeks ago when everything kind of went to poop for the Dallas Fuel, doesn't it? So let's see where it goes, Dallas. I think there is a glimmer of hope for you fans over there. Mind you, I've said this before, so let's not get our hopes up too much. Moving on, and we had San Francisco Shock taking on the Atlanta Reign, and after the Atlanta Reign lost 3-1 to the Gladiators, this was not going to get much easier. And fifth spot had already pretty much left them by this point. They do, however, put on a fantastic display against the San Francisco Shock. Fantastic display. Not much to play for the Shock, obviously, but Reign, they really gave this a go. This was a 3-2 to the San Francisco Shock. Shock turned it on in the last map. Atlanta Reign kind of fell apart. Again, Saucy looked better in this match, I'm not going to lie. We saw some value from him, but again, this swapping Erster and Saucy is bugging me a lot. It seems to be that Saucy is the Sombra player for the Atlanta Reign, so if they've got any case of wanting to play the Sombra, they have to put in Saucy. And on the other picks, Erster just looks so much better. So yeah, this is more promising for the Atlanta Reign, I'm not going to lie. But what disappoints me more from the Reign is that if they can make this so close, what about the Gladiators match? I think this may be the Shock taking their foot off the gas slightly instead of the Atlanta Reign really pushing forward. That is what I would worry about this match. And then the last match of the season was, as I said in the preview, the LA Derby. It was the Los Angeles Valiant taking on the Los Angeles Gladiators. 5th versus 6th. Winner takes the 5th spot. Who would it be? Of course it's an LA Derby. It goes to the 5th map. But in the end, Los Angeles Gladiators grind out quite a nice win on Lijiang Tower to take the series 3-2 and would be our 5th place team this year in NA. I am pretty pleased with my prediction of that. I thought the Gladiators would do pretty well this week. They've come into form at the perfect time. And I think this is a fantastic look for the Gladiators going into the playoffs. Valiant really took them close. There was great play from Birdring. There was great play from KSP, KSF, and obviously Kevster. I think both of these teams are really, really proving their worth right now. And I think both Los Angeles teams are teams that, like, people don't want to necessarily go up against. I think they're banana skin teams right now, especially the Gladiators. So that is where we finish our season. It has been a super interesting week. What we are going to do now is we're going to go over the standings. We're going to go over the standings in both NA, Asia, and overall, because this is our last time looking at the standings. Believe it or not, we are finally there. And it's going to be an interesting playoffs. It's going to be an interesting playoffs, let's say that. But overall, the standings will finish as the Dragons on top in that number 1 spot. Fusion in 2nd, the San Francisco Shock in 3rd, Paris Eternal in 4th. Guangzhou Charge would get that 5th spot. Mayhem in 6th, New York Excelsior in 7th, their lowest ever finish in the league, might I add. 8th for the Los Angeles Valiant, much, much better than anyone expected. The Los Angeles Gladiators consolidate in 9th, Hangzhou Spark in 10th, the Seoul Dynasty in 11th, Atlanta Reign down in 12th, Dallas Fuel in 13th, better than perhaps we expected considering the blow-up that happened a couple of weeks ago. The Hunters up in 14th, not too bad, Defiant in 15th, Outlaws in 16th, London Spitfire in 17th, just 1 map differential above the Titans in 18th. Spitfire could have done better this season in my opinion. I think some wins have been spoiled for the Spitfire, shall we say. Titans in 18th, it's been a rough one. Justice in 19th and Uprising, propping up the league in 20th. No one expected anything different there with only 14 map wins on the board this entire season. And just to note, we have 3 teams, the Houston Outlaws, London Spitfire and Vancouver Titans, all on 6 wins and 15 losses. It's got kind of tight down there. It's got kind of tight. And then above them you have both Defiant and Hunters on the same record as well. So it's rather interesting. And we move over to our regional standings, shall we say. North America, we saw Philadelphia Fusion top it out on number 1. San Francisco Shock in 2nd, Paris Eternal 3rd, Florida Mayhem 4th. Valiant would actually seal up the 5th spot. I got it wrong earlier in the video because Valiant got those extra wins in the tournaments, didn't they? And it proves how vital those wins can be in tournaments. They had 1 win of an advantage over the Los Angeles Gladiators and it was sealed on the 5th spot. Gladiators in 6th with 11 and 10 record, Valiant in 5th with a 12 and 10 record. Reign down in 7th. Dallas in 8th, Toronto in 9th, Houston in 10th, Vancouver in 11th, Washington in 12th, and Boston Uprising in 13th. Houston, Vancouver, Washington, and Boston will be the teams to feature first in the play-ins. In the APAC standings, we see Shanghai Dragons quite far ahead on top with that 27 and 2 record. Guangzhou Charge in 2nd with an 18 and 7 record. That's your top 2 teams in Asia. Then you have a batch of 3. This is the New York Excelsior, followed by the Hangzhou Spark, followed by the Seoul Dynasty. And then the bottom 2 teams, which will be the 2 to feature first in Asia for the playoffs, will be Chengdu Hunters in 6th and London Spitfire in 7th. London Spitfire will be the bottom team in APAC after their poor run. And we haven't seen Chengdu for 2 weeks either. So that's something else to take into account. And that rounds us out for this season. It's rather interesting, isn't it? It's been an up and down season. We've had breaks. We've had teams come in at different staggered points. We've had teams have massive amounts of games to play towards the end of the season. We have seen teams develop into better teams. We've seen teams get worse over time. we've seen teams with so much potential, and we've seen some teams really come to the forefront. And I think there are some teams that have caught a lot of people off guard. I think Shanghai Dragons, perhaps at the start of the season, weren't given the credit that perhaps they were due, and they have certainly come back to bite everyone during this campaign. And the Shock were not on top, and a lot of people, including myself, predicted the Shock to be on top. So this season took some twists and turns. It's been a long one, but we've got a lot more to play for. There's a lot of money on the line. There's a big old trophy on the line, that's for sure. We have playoffs coming up in just a couple of weeks. Then we have the grand finals, where we will see 4 teams, 2 from APAC, 2 from NA, compete against each other. There will be plenty of Overwatch League roundups between now and the playoffs, just viewing ahead of the playoffs and other reasons for our videos as well. It's going to be a very exciting time heading into September and October, and I'm sure we are going to see some very interesting Overwatch. Plus, we are going to be most likely in a new meta. We're going to be certainly in a new patch where Hog is doing tons of damage, and it'll be interesting to see how the pros react to that and the comps they run. It could have a very big impact on what we see in the playoffs. But I am going to leave it here for this one. So thank you guys so much for watching this video. If you'd like to, give it a like, subscribe if you're new, and I'll see you in the next video. See you then.